So I looked up the website. It's advertised online as a rehabilitation centre where young men go and sort out their issues, you know, and then they get back into society and they move on with their lives. And for me, that's the end goal. Well, that was the end goal, was getting back to society, not being stuck somewhere, not being tied to a rehab. I was sick of being tied to a drug dealer, tied to a prison, you know, tied to a chemist for my methadone, tied to a bottle shop for alcohol. I wanted freedom. I wanted pure freedom. So this sounded like the place for me. There's a little farm in the middle of nowhere. They had a furniture restoration project there as well, where they were selling lots of furniture, and part of the course was to get involved in restoring the old furniture that they got from house removals and selling it to the public to make money for the charity. Not a problem at all. I've always worked in the past, that is, before I fell into addiction, and I was quite keen to get out there, ran a landscaping business from there as well. So I spoke to my parents. They were still upset with me leaving the other rehab or falling out the other rehab. They were basically at their wits' end, didn't know where to turn, didn't know what to do. So I rang up Patel after checking out their website, and that was it. An appointment was made, and I was going to go in and I was going to hopefully go through the Patel program, and that would be it, me onto my next new chapter of my new great recovery life that I was looking forward to. My parents came and picked me up. I was excited, I was nervous, I was fearful. Was this going to be the last time I ever touched drugs again in my life? So they took me over to Patel in Nottinghamshire, and it was all handshakes, smiles. Right, you can't smoke in here, you got to leave all your vapes. I was like, no problem. My parents left me there. They lived like 4 hours away, so they drove off home. I'm in the middle of nowhere with a load of people I don't know, but it's a rehab. What could possibly go wrong? On the induction process, 2 people searched me, and they searched my clothes and absolutely everything I had. That's not uncommon when you go into rehab to have your stuff searched, because drug users or drug addicts or alcoholics even will sneak drink, drugs or anything into rehab for one last drink, one last hit while they're there. And obviously they can't allow that to happen. I've been searched in and out of prison before, but I have never been searched like I was searched on the way into Patel. I mean, a fingertip search of everything that I had. It took hours. I was rattling. I was not in a good way, but I just sat there and I plugged in and I let them do what they had to do. Then they took me to the changing rooms, into a toilet, a mixed toilet where everybody used, in front of 2 men. They made me strip naked and squat down while one of them peered underneath me several times. This made me a little bit uncomfortable. My last visit to prison, they don't even do that in prison. You know, that you get an x-ray when you go into prison now, and back in the day you would just bend and squat and it would all be just done really quickly and out the way. No, this was prolonged. This was, looking back, almost abuse, to be honest with you. It was not a comfortable position for me to be in, considering my past. And again, I let it slide. I'm in the middle of nowhere, I've got no money. So we got round to the form filling. I was on universal credit and housing benefit at the time. They made me cancel all that. I said, well, that's my only income. They said, you don't need income here. You know, we go out to work and that's how we earn the money and how we keep the place going. We provide food, we provide shelter, we provide everything that you need. So reluctantly, I signed an online form to give up all my universal credit rights from that second onwards. Alarm bells were starting to ring a little bit, but again, I had no choice. I was hundreds of miles away from home, hundreds of miles away from my friends, what little friends I had left, and hundreds of miles away from my family. Looking back now, I can see that that's all part of the control that they use. You've got nowhere to turn. You've got no money in your bank account. You've got no form of income whatsoever. So when you go out to work on the program with them, they let me stay around the house for a few days and help tidy up, but I had to get out to work pretty sharpish, which I was quite looking forward to getting back to work. You know, like I say, until I was incarcerated, I'd still worked as a screed pump runner. So a guy that was doing some flooring and that, he's got quite a big company doing flooring. I ran his screed pump for him. It was hard work. 60 tons of sand a day, 300 bags of cement into that machine, and I did my best to never let him down. Of course, I did a few times. I was a massive drug addict, you know. But he gave me a chance, and he gave me choices, and gave me inspiration, and he gave me hope as well. So I asked where I've been sleeping, and any rehab that I've been in before, you had your own little room, just a quiet place where you could go and chill out on your own if things got too much. This was a dormitory. Now, I already knew that. What I didn't realise was they were bunk beds, and you were assigned what they call a buddy, who you had to sleep underneath. There was loads of spare bunks. The house wasn't very full. loads of spare bunks, but you had to sleep under your buddy, who was a 20-year-old guy that had been incredibly indoctrinated into their way of Christianity. Now, I'm a Catholic Christian myself. I am all for God. I am all for Jesus. I'm all for Christianity. I'm all for any religion. Okay, if that helps you in your life, then I am for it. But what these guys were doing, that was not Christian. That was not Christian whatsoever. This poor lad was so mixed up. He likened Catholicism to being a Pharisee. You know, they taught him that's what that was. The Pharisees, as I'm sure some people will know, were actually the Jewish leaders of the time, around about the time of Jesus, who were not very nice people. You know, the Bible had been twisted and turned, and I was starting to see a lot of red flags. So my first question in the morning, after not sleeping all night, was, one, can I see a doctor? And then the second question was, what rehabilitation program do you run? Is it the Genesis program? Do you do 12 steps? Because bearing in mind, I've been in rehab for some months before, so I knew what to ask for, and I knew roughly what I should and maybe shouldn't be doing. Now, they said, oh, no, Chris, this isn't a rehabilitation program. This is a Christian living community. I said, what do you mean by that? They said, well, we live here, we work together, we eat together, we sleep together, and you know, this is you. This is where you stay from now on. I was like, well, okay, how long's the program? They said, you stay here until you go, until you want to leave. But when you leave, you're done with us. That's over. You can't come back for some time. It was all mental manipulation. I said, well, how can I leave? Because you've took all my universal credit away from me. You've made me sign it off. And their response was, we'll drop you at a train station and we give you £2.50. Now, I'm sure most of you know that any train to anywhere in this country is an awful lot more than £2.50. So I'm starting to feel very trapped. I'm starting to feel like the walls are closing in. We're in a farm in the middle of nowhere. It's a brand new building, massive. The biggest TV I've ever seen on the wall. It must have been 8 foot wide, this TV. We weren't allowed to put it on. You know, they were like, look at our TV. I said, when do we get to watch it? Oh, no, you're not allowed to watch it. I said, well, what's the point in having it up there? You know, they didn't like me. The guys that were running the show there, it was very strange. There was a pastor there, and he was bringing up 2 little kids. I'm talking like 6 and 8 year old kids that would freely come in and out with people that are in recovery from drug addiction, crime, alcoholism, and God knows what else. There's no background checks done on you when you go into this place. And the children, they weren't allowed to go and see their friends, or they was picked up from school, taken there, that was it. And they hung around with these adults, which I always found incredibly odd. But again, who was I to judge at the time? Now, just down from that guy, so that was the pastor, what they called themselves, a pastor. Just down from that guy were the guys that ran the house that I lived in. We had to call them number 1 and number 2. You know, I didn't realise at the time, but alarm bells should have been going absolutely mad in my head. I was allowed a phone call every Saturday for 15 minutes. And I spoke to my mum. It was incredibly hard to get used to the phone. I had to have someone sitting with me when I was talking to them. They said it's in case I ordered drugs. I now know it's in case I said anything about the situation and the circumstances to which I was living in. And I was beginning to lie, beginning to say, no, it's fine here, it's okay, I'm all right. You know, don't worry, I'll get through. I'm just rattling. This is all like in my head. So I was kind of lying to my parents because I didn't want them to be let down. You know, looking back, I can see that's where those people wanted me to be. They wanted me to be that vulnerable. They wanted me to be that guy that would stay there like the rest of them had. Over time, they just built up their community, their Christian living community. I spent a few weeks there. Like I say, I went out to work and they were charging absolute ridiculous amounts of money. The first day that I went out to work, I was really looking forward to it. I got up in the morning, having again not slept, and still asking to see a doctor, but being told, yeah, we'll sort it out for you. We all got in a van and we were dropped off, and I must have walked 15 miles that day when I was rattling off methadone, heroin and crack, delivering leaflets through doors. We were literally marching leaflets. Now I understand that's how businesses work and you have to do that, but I was ever so poorly. And when we got home that day, we had what I can only describe as slop to eat. So after a few days, I've got into him a bit. I said, I really need to see a doctor. I said, you're making me go out to work every day to pay for my upkeep, and I'm not able to see a doctor. Oh, don't worry, we'll sort it out. I hadn't been to the toilet. My stomach was out here. I hadn't been to the toilet for about a week by this point, because they were feeding us. It was like raw cabbage and pasta, just carbs and turnips and stuff that had been delivered. They wouldn't buy any food, and it was not good food. It was all almost past its sell by date. It was making me ever so sick. When you come off heroin and methadone, it causes incredibly bad restless leg syndrome. Your whole body feels like it's itching on the inside. And the one thing that does kind of help it a little bit is having a really hot bath. I know it sounds a bit funny, but lying in a bath and then turning the hot water on until your legs are nearly stinging and they just float there, it really relieves the symptoms just for a little while, just for while you're in the bath. So I'd get up in the night in my first sort of week or so at Battelle, and I'd creep down and I'd go to the bath, and suddenly the first time there was a knock on the door. Chris, are you in there? I say, yeah, I'm having a rattle bath. You can't be in there on your own. I've got to come and sit with you. I said, you what? They said, we can't let you in the bath in case you're using drugs in there. I said, where am I going to get drugs from? You've searched all my clothes. You've searched all my possessions. You've looked inside me. Where am I going to get drugs from? I need to be in this bath because I can't sleep. I haven't slept since I've been here. Now, there was a bit of a row, but not too much. And I got out of bed. I didn't want to get kicked out of a rehab, of course, because my parents had put faith in this place. They'd put faith in me. This continued night after night. I wasn't going to wake somebody up to say, I can't sleep and I need to go and have a bath. I was a 41-year-old man. I wasn't about to wake up a 20-year-old to watch me in the bath. That's just not, I couldn't bring myself to do that. So I was sneaking down every night. I was getting in this rattle bath, pouring myself a bath and getting in it and trying to relieve the symptoms of my rattle and my withdrawals. I was getting incredibly tired. I was starting to hallucinate because I hadn't slept. Again, asking to go and see the doctor, but they just weren't sorting it out for me. It was all promises. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. Just get through today. We'll do it tomorrow. I was in absolute agony. A few months previous, I'd almost had my leg amputated due to a cellulitis infection, which I told them about. And I said, I really need to do something. I really need to see a doctor because this is going to get bad. If this gets infected again, I could end up losing my leg, and I don't want that to happen. Don't worry, Chris, we'll sort it out for you tomorrow. We'll sort it out for you tomorrow. This whole process went on for a good few weeks. And I was getting more and more desperate, more and more unhappy, more and more upset with the way that they were even I could see the way they were reading the Bible out. They were changing the words as they were, because we were all reading along together. It was part of the program that we had to do. We were all reading along together, and they were changing the words, emphasizing certain words and twisting it to suit a narrative that suited what they were doing. And the worrying thing was everybody at the table around dinner time, after dinner time when we had the Bible readings, was agreeing, and they were lapping it all up. Please teach us more. Please teach us more. Now, nobody in that room had studied theology. So in my mind, they had no right to teach anybody how to read a Bible, especially how to read it with words that weren't in it. And I realized it was indoctrination. I realized what they were trying to do was mold the words and mold the message inside that book to try and make people stay there. You know, you're not, if you leave here, how Christian are you really? Because, you know, it was a goal to be Christian in there. It was a goal to be the best Christian. They forced us to go to a church, a Protestant church. I'm Catholic. No problem with Protestants whatsoever, but you really shouldn't be forcing me to go there. I'm Christian. Of course I am, right? Because I'm Catholic. But trying to force a Catholic man into a Protestant church, it's only ever going to end in tears. They tried to force me to do what they called an alpha course. I refused to do it. I sat there in silence. Again, I got in trouble. They were going to threaten to call my parents and tell my mum. Now, obviously going through a heroin withdrawal, that was bringing back childhood memories. All this trauma that I'd been through as a kid and growing up through my teens was all starting to come back, because they were using words that my teachers used. They were using words that my bullies and my abusers were using. We'll tell your mum, you know, and it was all control. I can see that looking back now, and I feel for the people that are stuck in these places. They're a worldwide charity, apparently. I don't see it as being a charity. I actually got into the business side of it a little bit, and I asked a lot of questions. I do that anyway with my autism. I ask and I ask and I ask until I know the nth degree about what I'm asking about. And I found out that they were turning over £11,000 a week in that one place, and they weren't giving anybody in it any of it. So I was wondering where that money went to, and that's a big question that needs asking. If there is anyone watching this that can audit them, I would strongly recommend doing that. This isn't me just having a go at an organisation because I fell out with them. I didn't fall out of them at all. This is me trying to shed some light on the dangers of certain institutions that are out there that say that they're looking after vulnerable adults, because they certainly did not look after me. I never got that doctor's. I didn't go to the toilet for over 2 weeks, and when I did finally, it was black liquid for about 3 days. This was all reported to my number 1 and my number 2, and they still never sent me to the doctors. So I got out of bed one morning after another night of not sleeping. I'm about 3 weeks in at this point, and I had enough. I was done with this place, so I demanded a phone call with my mum. I said I'd made my mind up, I need to go, but I need to let my mum know where I am in the hope that she'll send me some money so I can get a train, because I know these people aren't going to help me away. So I said, I need to speak to my mum on the phone. You can't do that, your phone call's not till Saturday. Now this was a Tuesday, Wednesday, I think, if I remember it rightly. You can't speak to your mum till Saturday. And I could not, in my head, I could not see myself lasting out till Saturday until I'd potentially killed myself. I was done. I was absolutely broken, and I hadn't been using for about 3 weeks at this point. Now, they said if you do make a phone call to your mum, you have to leave on the spot because you've broken a rule. I said, I don't care, I'll leave. And they were shocked. They thought that manipulation or that threat was going to stop me ringing my mum. So I rang my mum. She said, hello. I said, Mum, it's me. She said, are you okay? I said, no, not really. I'm leaving this place. And they were all gathered round me. She said, what do you mean? I said, Mum, they're treating me bad. And as soon as I started mentioning what was going on, they snatched the phone off me and hung it up. Now, they made me pack my bag, so I packed absolutely everything up that I had. They'd stolen a lot of my stuff, a lot of my toiletries, and that were taken off of me when I moved in there, because you're not allowed to use those in the rehab. But I noticed the number 1s and 2s suddenly had the same toiletries that were taken off of me when I got there. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out they were just taking them off me for themselves. They popped me in a van. 2 people have got in with me, all my belongings. They've taken me to Nottingham train station. It took about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they were like, oh, I wish we could have done better for you, Chris. I said, you had the opportunity every day to call me a doctor. You had the opportunities. I told you how I was feeling every single day, and now it's come to this. My mind is made up. They said, I'm really sorry. I hope you don't hold it against us. I said, are you mad? I said, this place is probably the most dangerous place I've ever been in. And I've lived in A category jails with murderers 2 doors down from me and next door to me. And this is the most dangerous place that I've ever been in for anybody. Just dropped me at the station. So they did. They dropped me off. They gave me £2.50. My phone battery was died because I wasn't allowed my phone, of course. So I went to turn it on to call my mum. Nothing. I had to go into a phone shop and beg them to use a charger. I explained my situation and what was going on. I spoke to my mum. She was in absolute bits. It was hours ago since the phone was put down on her. She said, why did you hang up? I said, I didn't. They did. She went, what? I said, Mum, this is what's been going on. She said, I've been ringing them every single day. Haven't they been telling you? I said, no. As far as I'm concerned, you've dropped me here and that was it. The phone call we have once a week. Apart from that, I didn't know that you'd been in touch at all. I thought you just wanted me gone. She said, not at all. She said, they told me that you were thriving, you were a member of the community and you were doing really well and you didn't have any issues. I said, Mum, this is what's been going on. And I explained to her the whole situation. She sent me some money and I got a train to Loughborough. I ended up staying in a hotel in Loughborough. And then I got involved with a County Lines drug gang. And we were selling crack cocaine and heroin on the streets to anybody that wanted to buy it off us. I'll explain all that in my next video. Thank you for watching, guys. If you don't already subscribe to my channel, please do. Give us a like. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments section below and I'll gladly answer any questions that you've got whatsoever.